In my opinion, there's nothing that's better suited for generating an audience than a single panel comic. As far as we're talking on, web publishing and social media and things of that nature, there is nothing that is better suited for building an audience than a single panel comic. Why? Because single panel comics act exactly the same way as the most popular kinds of content on the web, and particularly on social media. For example, there's very little distinction between a single panel comic and a meme, right? And we all know how popular and how powerful memes can be. A single panel comic has all of those same ingredients as a meme. And so I think having said that, now, there's no better time to be a long-form cartoonist than there is right now. And I can tell you that from experience as somebody who's been publishing since the very beginning, starting back in 2000. It's never been a better time to be a long-form cartoonist. However, a single-panel cartoonist has the best, in my opinion. You're starting the game at a head start. The very fact that you're building these things that are very easily shared, very easily understood quickly, right? You've got one panel, one illustration, and one caption that is tailor-made for social media sharing and, as a result, for audience building. Okay. So reading in between the lines, it sounds like you may be having some trouble building an audience. Okay. That's okay. That's okay. We're going to talk about that in a little bit here. The first thing you've got to do is, it's kind of like the double-edged sword. On one hand, I don't think there's anything as powerful as a single panel comic for building audience. On the other side of that coin, there's nothing that's more difficult to write than a single panel comic, especially as most single panel comics are, one that it tries to be funny, tries to be humor. Humor is notoriously difficult to write. A single panel comic is a condensation, a distillation of all of the mechanics of comedy and cartooning into the most pure, essential kind of form, right? Again, one illustration, one caption. And you don't get to really screw around with a whole lot of words in your captions. That caption had better be a short caption. That's very difficult to make funny happen under those circumstances. It's not one of my strong points. In fact, several years ago, I challenged myself as part of my Patreon to do, I call them a bonus comic. So I try to get one every week, which is a single panel comic that I just throw out to my Patreon backers. It's not listed as one of the rewards. It's strictly an extra. And I've been doing single panel comics for an awfully long time now. And before that, I did a number of single panel comics as well. The comic I did for the Daily News that accompanied a sex advice column, that was single panel. But I still have to challenge myself to do that. And I can tell you there's nothing more difficult, especially because a single panel comic on Tuesday, you could be talking about astronauts. On Wednesday, you could be talking about sentient bananas, two bananas talking to each other. On Thursday, you could be talking about mermaids, right? And it's very difficult to write something that can be anything. If you give me a story, I can write that story. I'll write the hell out of that story. Doing a single panel comic, especially if it's your traditional one, right? That doesn't have recurring characters or certainly not an ongoing storyline. That's very difficult to write. So the first thing you've got to look at, Kelly, is number one, is this comic hitting with your audience? Are you achieving the funny? And that's not to put you down, because again, I can tell you, it's very difficult. And there are absolutely weeks when I take a swing and a miss. There may be several weeks in there where I depending on who you ask, which one of my readers that you ask, might be a lot of weeks in there that I've got a swing and a miss. So it's not putting someone down to say the first thing, especially for a single panel, the first thing you got to look at is, am I finding the funny? Am I making this as funny as it can possibly be? And then the rest, then you've got to drop back to the 4 C's of social media. And are you using social media properly? And that's a whole conversation we can get into. I've got tons of stuff written on the Webcomics Handbook, which is my Substack how-to newsletter. I've got tons of information on not only using not only using social media well, but using Substack as well as part of social media. I've got a lot of stuff written there. But what I can say is this. A lot of people, one of the most pressing questions that I get asked from younger cartoonists or people who are at the beginning of their journey, something that cartoonists ask me all the time, they say, how do I get my work out there? How do I get my work out there? And it's one of the biggest questions that I always get asked. How do I get my work out there? And the answer is really, really disappointing. The answer is your work is already out there. The question that you need to be asking is, how do I retain the readers that I've got now that I've found them? In other words, if I gave you a magic wand and I said that I could bring 1 million people to your, and then you fill in the blank, whether it's your website or a social media feed or your Substack newsletter, if I gave you a magic wand and say I'd give you 1 million people today, most of us would take that opportunity and say, yes, I want that. I want to wave that magic wand, right? The problem is you've already waved it and it didn't work. If you've been doing comics on the web for any appreciable amount of time, you've already had 1 million people come through and see your work in one form or another. The problem is you didn't keep them. And that's a combination of, are you doing a good comic? And believe me, in humor, that takes a long, long time to figure out how to find the funny for yourself as a writer, and how to convey that funny as a cartoonist. And the second part is, are you using social media wisely? Are you retaining those readers as they're finding you? Okay. And that's a whole lot of conversations that we can absolutely get into a little bit down the road. Like I said, I've done a lot of writing about this, but some of the things that are important are, as you're putting your work out there and you're trying to retain readers, is your social media profile set up right? This is something that just over the last couple of months I've become really passionate about, because after doing a couple of things where I needed to reach out to cartoonists, or I just found somebody I liked and went to their social media profile to find out more about them, I find out that their social media profile is not set up for retention. It's set up to be clever. And when you're branding, this is it doesn't sound right. It's incongruous. As incongruous as it sounds, when you're doing branding, this is no time to be clever. This is time to be concise and direct. So your social media profile needs to say, who are you? What do you do? And why should I care? And I should be able to get to all kinds of other ways of keeping in touch with you from that social media profile. You should have lots of things going on in your social media feed beyond just the comic. A lot of people have a hard time. They say, well, what do I post when I'm not posting the comic? And the answer to that question is the 4 C's, right? The 4 C's are content, commercial, curation, and kindness. Although that's kind of a joke. Kindness obviously starts with a C, or I'm sorry, it starts with a K. The 4th C could just as well be commenting. Okay. You should be posting on a regular basis, and we can talk about how often to post if you want. You should be posting on a regular basis, not only the comic, that's your content, Also, content is also your thoughts to the degree that you want to share them on anything. And of course, we put anything with an asterisk. If you want to start talking about politics or religion or some of those things that you were probably taught at a very young age not to bring up at a dinner party, you have to understand that there's consequences that go along with that. Whether you're saying something that I agree with or something that I disagree with, there's consequences to talking about certain topics, but you're not limited to talking to those. You have a lot of thoughts. You have a lot of things to offer the greater community. And that's also your content. Commercial is stuff like, here's my Patreon, here's my Kickstarter, here's how you can buy my latest book. That should be metered in with the other things. Curation is the one that cartoonists forget about all the time. Cartoonists are weak on curation. And that's a real problem because it's one of the most powerful ways of making social media work. Remember, social media is social. That's the whole engine that makes social media work. It's social. Curation is when you share somebody else's work on your feed. It's a retweet or a reskeet or a reshare. It's when you take somebody else's work and you share it on your feed. That's curation. It adds value to you as somebody who I'm considering to follow as a social media person, as a follower of yours. When I see you curating interesting stuff, it's like, oh, I can follow this one person. I'm going to get their stuff and all kinds of other cleverly curated things that they're also going to send me. That's a good follow. That just think about it. When you're taking a look at anybody and all of a sudden you realize that what they're doing is enticing to you. And it's not just what they're doing, it's what they're sharing. That makes them a good follow. You could be a good follow too, but you don't want to curate. You think that people just want to see and hear your stuff. And that's the curse of being creative, right? We don't think, we think, why would I share anybody else's stuff? I'm here to share my stuff. They just want to hear from me. You know, that's not the case. And for those of you on Substack that are doing newsletters of your own, if you think I'm wrong, prove it to yourself, open up your newsletter stats and look at your open rate. That's the percentage of people who signed up to get your newsletter. They didn't even open it when it hit their inbox. They immediately trash it, or it's still sitting there waiting to be opened someday when this person gets around to it, and then it's never going to happen. That tells you everything you need to know about how desperate these people are to hear from you. They're not. Chances are your open rate is below 35%. That's very common. Okay. You need that, but that's not to make you, again, this shouldn't make you feel bad. It should give you a more realistic idea of what people are after when they do follow you. And it tells you that they're just not desperate to hear the things that come out of your mouth or out of your brain. They also want to know what you're interested in. What comic made you laugh? What thing are you sharing with them today to make their social media feed happier, right? Does that mean you've got to reshare that news item about that depressing thing that just happened? Maybe, if that's your branding. Maybe not. Maybe not. If you consider yourself to be somebody that people are following as an entertainer, that's how I look at myself when I'm doing this, mainly entertainer and partially educator. I don't share things to my followers that unless I think that it's going to make their day better, unless I think it's going to make their day brighter. There's lots of people sharing horrible, traumatic, disappointing, depressing things on their feeds. They don't need me doing it too. Okay. That's something that you've got to decide where the line is for you. But curation, that third C of social media, should absolutely fit into that. And then the fourth is comment. Again, a thing that almost no cartoonist is doing well on social media is comment. In other words, Instead of just talking about your stuff all the time, you drop into somebody else's comments and you say something nice about theirs, or you drop into a conversation happening in a certain community and you say something that's smart or insightful or kind or generous in their thread. People get to know you that way. You become a member of the community that way. And it has nothing to do with saying, hey, look at me. Here's a link to my website. You don't do any of that. Remember, whose house are you in? You don't do any of that. You just drop in as a member of that community and you participate. Social media is social. So chances are most of us are doing content. I'm sure we're all doing content. And if I know that the garden variety cartoonist, I know you're doing commercial. The question is, are you doing all four C's? Are you doing curation and are you doing commenting? Are you being kind, as it were? Okay. That's the big question. And then it's a question of persistence, right? How long have you been doing this? Are you doing this consistently on a regular basis to a frequency that is comfortable for you, that you're able to keep up on a long-term basis? How long have you been doing this? If you're just starting out, webcomics has always been a long game. Nobody, hardly anybody gets overnight success. And most of the overnight successes that you do see have 10 years that you didn't see, that they were slogging it out. Okay. So this doesn't happen quickly for anybody. This is a long game. It's a marathon, not a sprint. So that's my thoughts for somebody doing single panel comics on the web. That I'm glad to see that, Kelly. Kelly says, you've seen into my soul. Yeah, well, there's a reason for it, Kelly. And that is, and all of the stuff that I said, along with, punchlines that miss and sometimes didn't do social media so great. Because I've been there. I've been there. All the stuff that you hear me talking about on this live stream is because I've already made these mistakes and I've learned from them. And I like getting on the screen and sharing them with folks so that maybe I can keep you from making a few of these mistakes. That's really what it comes down to, is I've already made all the mistakes. I'm not particularly smart. Anybody who's ever met me can confirm I'm not a particularly smart guy. I'm not particularly well connected. I don't have any of that. The only thing I've got is my mistakes, and I've made a lot of those. I've made a lot of mistakes, and so I've been able to learn from them, and that's what I'm able to talk from is those mistakes. Super D joining us. Fantastic. Good to see you, D. So that's my thoughts on a single panel comic. If you're doing single panel comics, Kelly, hang in there. It's tough. And there are some strategies for doing that. We actually talked about some strategies for single panel comics in the Comic Lab. I think it landed in Pro Tips, but it was on the Comic Lab podcast. And also listen to a few people and watch some people who do it particularly well. Dave Blazik was on the show. He does a syndicated single panel comic called Loose Parts. Probably, in my estimation, along with Mark Parisi, couple of people that are doing single panel at the highest level of quality that I've seen ever in terms of people who are doing comics right now. They're tremendous. Watch what they do and watch the strategies that they employ, not only in their online life, but in the craft of comics. That's my only other advice is the tried and true. Look at the people who are doing it well and see what you can steal from them. See what you can take and say, oh yeah, I see what they're doing there. It means looking through their work, like buying a book from one of these people, or going to their website and scrolling through, but not just looking and laughing, but after you've like done your initial scroll through, then going back and really picking apart how they worded that punchline, how they illustrated that illustration. Do they know the correct way to set up a joke, right? Not too long ago, I was talking about a single panel cartoonist that did their caption above the illustration as like this floating banner. And I said at the time, this person is not going to get anywhere near the traction they should because they're putting their punchline above their setup. It should go setup punchline. You read top to bottom, right? But they had the punchline, and almost all the time, that's where the funny thing was. And then you'd look down into the illustration and see it basically confirmed. There was no surprise, right? So take a look at how they're setting their stuff up, how they're doing it. If you're anything like me, when I was first starting out, I wanted to find 110 things I could do different so that I could stand out and be unique, right? And so I didn't draw eyes the way anybody else drew eyes. You go back and look at my early work. It's horrible. All right? And a lot of it had to do with the way I drew eyes. I didn't draw word balloons the way they did it. There was so many things I was trying to be unique. And what I was actually doing was making a whole breed of new mistakes. There's a lot to be said from taking those generations that went before us, the 100 and some years of comics history that has come before us, and take a look at some of the stuff that has sticked. Take a look at some of the stuff that has earned their place through time. And they're still good. Those are some immutable facts of cartooning, whether it's writing or art or presentation. There are some things that just, they work because they work. And you going out there and trying to find a new way to do it is 9 chances out of 10 just going to make your climb to the top that much longer, because you're going to have to unlearn all that stuff. There's a reason people weren't doing these large, tall, skinny eye shapes, right? That Brad Guigar was doing when he first started out, because it looked terrible and it made expressions impossible, and they didn't sit on the face well, and good Lord, there was nothing good about it. But I wanted to be unique. So there's another one I want to warn you against, is this overpowering urge we have to be unique. That doesn't mean that you should copy anybody either, but you hear what I'm saying? Sometimes we try to force our art style. We try to do things just because they're different, not because they're efficient or effective or attractive, right? And part of it, you have to build your aesthetic. So those are my thoughts there. I kind of got into the weeds on that one. As you can tell, I love talking about comics, and single panel I have a lot of respect for. So that's kind of the reason that I like doing this show every week. As we're waiting for new topics and new questions, that was actually one of the topics I wanted to talk about today, was the whole "how do I get my work out there" thing. That's a really important thing to remember. And that is, your work is already out there. It's not that you're not getting out there. If you're putting your work on Twitter and Blue Sky and all these different social media platforms, your work is already out there. The problem is you're not keeping the people once they've seen your work. And that's where you got to do the hard work. That's where you've got to do the strategy. That's where you've got to do the 4 C's of social media. That's where you've got to be the social part of social media if you actually want to retain those readers. And then, I'm always going to say it, you've got to have your own website. You've got to have your own website so that when people do find you and they do trip over to your social media profile, or you promote it from your feed, you can send them to that website where you own and control your own work, and you've got a whole archive there, and it opens up the entire world of your comics to that person that ventured over. That's what we're doing all of this work for. All this work on social media is not necessarily to build a large social media following. That's a trap that many of us fall into. It's not about building a big social media following. In fact, I don't care anything about my follower numbers. We do not measure a social media platform by the people. We measure it by the passion. I will take a small, relatively engaged group of people following me on social media any day over a large number, most of whom really aren't all that tuned into what I'm doing. Okay. In fact, that's actually can be the death kiss for an independent creator. Having a large, big number. You see it all the time. You get these scams come across, people who can offer to give you a certain number of followers. They can manufacture this. And of course, they're doing it with bots and other nefarious schemes. But people who are conned into believing that success is about big numbers are very apt to take a chance on something like this. Okay. And it's a real trap, because what you want is a passionate audience, not necessarily a populous one. You want passion, not body count. Okay. That's what it's all about. And I'll take a small passionate group, and have for many years taken a small passionate group. It's not about building that follower count. My job on Blue Sky is not necessarily to build that number up. Although I do keep an eye on that number. I certainly want it to get bigger as I'm doing things, but it's not my goal. My goal on Blue Sky is to funnel people to my website and or my Patreon, where the real action is. That's what it's all about. I don't care about that Blue Sky number. I live and die by the Patreon number. I've got that one memorized day to day. That Patreon number is crucial to me, because that's where I'm doing my business. But my Blue Sky number doesn't really matter. It's a number. It's going to go up. It's going to go down. And my life is going to be the same. Either way, I'm using social media as a funnel to funnel it to my website and to Patreon. And then also, incidentally, to any other place that I might be monetizing, like Kickstarter, drivetrucomics.com, where I'm selling ebooks, et cetera, et cetera. But it's not about building that follower count. It's about building passion. We cartoonists make a huge mistake when we assume that people are paying attention on social media. And so what we do is, just like George is talking about here down in the comments, we say, well, I shared that comment. I shared that comic Tuesday. I can't share it again. It's already Wednesday or Friday, or it's 2 weeks from Tuesday. All of those don't really matter. You know why? Because nobody's paying attention on social media. They're really not. And if you want to challenge me on that, next time you're at the park or on the bus or just in the doctor's waiting room, waiting to be called next, just watch people scroll through social media. You'll see they're making their decisions lightning fast. You can't even measure it in a nanosecond. They're making content decisions that fast. They've got an endless stream of content coming through their phone. If you think that they remembered what you posted last Tuesday, you're full of yourself. And if they do, on the off chance somebody says, "Oh, I remember that you posted last Tuesday," say, "Thanks. I hope you like it the second time." And by the way, it doesn't matter what you say, because nobody's going to remember what you said to that guy. Do you understand what I'm saying? You should absolutely be repurposing, recycling, repackaging, and reusing and reposting, and any of the other rewords that you can think about in there. And I don't care with a day is, there are times that I'll post the same comic the same day. It might not be the same format, might not be the same reason that I put in the chatter for posting it. I'll post the same thing the same day. And by the way, you don't have to absolve yourself by saying, "I'm reposting this for the nighttime crowd." Bullshit. Nobody's paying attention. And by the way, "I'm reposting this for the nighttime crowd" is not a compelling reason to get me to read your comic, right? I don't care. And all the things that you see web cartoonists say on social media all the time, I'm going to tell you the ones that make me scream the loudest. "I'm reposting this because ... Put your explanation here. Don't care. Here's my comic. It updates Tuesdays and Thursdays." Stop. I just told you. And again, you can tell yourself just by watching somebody gone through and view social media. For crying out loud, nobody's memorizing what your update days are. They don't care. They don't care. You've got a long you've got a whole lot of social media to do before you get to the point where you get to start worrying about whether somebody knows you update on Tuesday and Thursday. That's bullshit. And it doesn't belong in a social media post where you're trying to retain readers, that topic that we talked about at the very top of this live stream. So I don't want that. I update my comic on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And if I see one more thirsty web cartoonist saying that their comic is free, I'm going to scream. Nobody cares. Almost everything on the web is free, right? And subscription content is way more popular than it was back in 2010 when I started doing subscription content. But those of us who are reading stuff on social media understand that gig too. We know that how social media subscriptions on social media are often marketed. We know that we're going to get probably a little bit for free to get us in the door. And then they're going to, try to put the clinch on us. Saying that you got a free webcomic is the dumbest branding available. Because of course it's free. It's on social media, dummy. You don't need to tell me it's free. So telling me your update schedule, telling me that it's free, all of that, I want you to take that right out of your vocabulary. Don't say any of it. So what does that leave you to say? I'm telling you, I'm going to make it happen. I'm going to make this acronym happen. SWIG, SWIG. Say why it's good. Say why it's good, right? John just jumped into the chat and said, or telling people that it's funny, quote unquote funny. Yeah, you don't tell people it's funny. You make them laugh. That's how you tell them. You do something funny. You don't say, hey, I'm a really funny guy. You ever walk up to somebody and say, hey, I'm a funny guy? What's the first thing that they say to you? They say, well, tell me a joke. And you're dead. Because that's no way to start comedy, right? You are dead if you get into that situation. So don't tell them it's funny. Do something funny, show something funny, write something funny. Steve Martin never had I don't know whether he still does it, but there was a time when he was really a force on Twitter, back when Twitter was a completely different platform. He never had to sit there and tell people he was funny. He wrote funny tweets and we all followed because we wanted to see the next one. That's how funny works on social media. You don't tell them it's funny. You do something funny. Right? So instead, what I want you to do is say why it's good. SWIG. You say why it's good. Here's this thing. I'm going to tell you a little bit about it. And remember, if you're not sure how to say why it's good, and by the way, if you don't know how to SWIG, if you don't know how to put that into words, why your comic is good, then you need to take a break from doing comics just for like 48 hours and make that your number one priority. When somebody says, what's good about your comic? You need to have the answer to that. You need to have a lot of answers for that. You need to be able to speak extemporaneously on why you're good. And if you can't just, by the way, I see this happen all the time too. You see somebody say, well, I'm just not a good promoter. Well, good. Enjoy obscurity, because you're not going to make it, pal. You don't get to just shrug and say, well, I'm not a good promoter. You better learn promotion. This whole world is about promotion right now. We have long gone past the point where we produce things in this country. We are now living through what's called the attention economy. And your ability to make a living in this economy, especially as an independent creator, is based on your ability to do smart promotion and to do it effectively. Okay. So you don't just get to say, well, I guess I'm not good. I never really wanted to be a promoter. I didn't want to learn business. I just want to be an artist. Good. You one less person that I got to compete with for a reader. You're going to take yourself out of the game, and I'm okay with that. I've got no problem if you want to take yourself. Somebody else tries to take you out of the game, they've got an enemy in me. You want to take you out of the game, I'll let you. Okay? So say why it's good. And you've got to be able to put that into words. You've got to be able to say why your stuff is good. And you've got to be able to say it in a number of different permutations. It's not just one sentence. It's a number of reasons. It should be why your stuff is good. If you can't, and by the way, many don't feel bad if you don't have a sentence or two creeping to mind and jumping to your lips right now. Uh, it's the last thing that anybody's going to talk about in a how to draw comics book, right? How to do comics, how to draw cartoons. They don't talk about this stuff. Because let's face it, we're living in a very different world right now than when most of those books were written. But it is absolutely part of the profession now. It's got to be. And, if you're one of the people that have signed with a publisher or signed with a corporation that takes this on, and you think you got it made because somebody else is taking care of that promotion, first thing I'm going to tell you is take a good look at the quality of promotion they're doing. And are they actually, in fact, I had a conversation. This was a conversation that happened on YouTube connected to this very live stream, where somebody was kind of saying, well, yeah, but I signed with the publisher and it's their job to do the promotion. And I don't think they're promoting me very good. And I said, well, see, what you just said there is a big, big problem, because the reason that company that you signed with takes the chunk of revenue for your work that they took is because they do certain things, including, but not limited to, distribution, right? Bookkeeping and promotion. And if they're not doing good promotion for your work, you've got to ask yourself, then why am I paying them? Why am I giving them a portion of my revenue if they're not doing good promotion? If they can't send readers to you that you then have to retain, if they can't send potential customers, then why are they taking that chunk of the revenue? That's got to be a question that you've got to be able to answer for yourself. Okay. That's a huge part of the reason that I've been very, very outspoken about independent comics and the fact that artists need to learn business. This has been something I've been passionate about for well over 25 years at this point. Artists need to understand the business that they're in. There is absolutely no one who gets to say, well, my business manager takes care of that for me. Those are the people that end up getting screwed because those are the people who are very easy to take advantage of. You've got to be, even if you've got a company you've signed with, whether it's they publish your books, if you're a middle grade graphic novelist and your stuff is getting out into bookstores, etc., and you've got that kind of reach, you still have to be able to understand enough about the business so you can look over their shoulders and make sure that they're earning that portion of your money that they're putting in your pocket for your comic that you created. Because let's face it, distribution is not that hard anymore. Distribution is very easy. Publishing, printing is not that hard. If a dummy like me can figure out printing an offset print run of a few hundred books at a time, I guarantee you can do it. Getting into bookstores, that's fantastic, but bookstores are dying. There's one bookstore you need to get in, and that's Amazon. And then the rest is your ability to build an audience and connect with that audience and say, oh, by the way, here's my Kickstarter. Here's my book. Go buy it over here. A lot of those things that companies are very happy to take a portion of your revenue for, you have to be able to look over their shoulders and ask yourself and be able to answer it wisely. Is that worth what they're taking? That's why artists need to be business people. That's why you need to understand business. Let's talk about using Substack to promote comics. That's a pretty good 10-minute conversation. Let's talk about Substack to promote comics. You should be, first of all, understanding that Substack is two things. I saw this come up, and actually one of our listeners, D. Fish, jumped in and kind of straightened the person out because he was like, should I be posting on Substack posts? Should I be posting a newsletter or should I be doing notes? Because it seems like notes gets a lot of people talking and sharing. But then again, I feel like I should be doing a newsletter. Here's the first thing you need to understand about Substack. Substack is two platforms, and they're two connected platforms, but these two platforms do very different things. And you have to understand that, okay? Substack posts and Substack notes. All right. Posts is your newsletter. Posts goes out to subscribers, okay, who may or may not be paid based on how you've got that set up. But the posts that you do on Substack, that's your newsletter. That's going out to the people who are subscribed to you. And that's great. You should absolutely be doing that. Notes is a social media function of Substack, and it's completely separate. And you should be doing notes too. You should be promoting your posts on notes, and you should be promoting your notes on posts. Either way, you should be doing the same thing. Notes is where you do your traditional social media, the 4 C's of social media. You can promote one of your posts, but you're also talking about other things in notes, and you gain followers in notes. Okay, and so if somebody's following you on Substack, they are more likely to see your notes. And one of the things that you're going to be doing on notes is telling them about your posts, your newsletter, right? So your main objective is yes, notes is very energetic. There's a lot of stuff going on, a lot of sharing. It gets a lot of sis boom ba. You should be using notes to funnel people into your newsletter, into your posts. Okay. You should be using both of them. And the big thing that it took me a long time to figure out that people need to understand is that Substack is 2 platforms. Posts, that's your newsletter, and notes, that's the social media aspect of Substack. Now let's just talk about your newsletter. We're going to leave posts over to the side. Now, you're a comic artist that is using Substack newsletters to promote. You should have 2 different type of posts. And by the way, this has got nothing to do with our previous conversation. It just so happens that the number is 2 again. Okay. It's just a magic number. There's no connection between our previous conversation other than to say that you have to understand that what I'm talking about now just goes into posts. It's not necessarily something that we're going to port over to notes. Okay. So now we're just talking about your Substack newsletter. And if you're a comic artist, you should be doing 2 types of posts to your newsletter subscribers. The first one is your comic. And I've got a very good template for a Substack comic post on the Webcomics Handbook, which you can follow along with. If you are following me, or better yet, subscribing to the Webcomics Handbook, you can click my name right up there. Should be right about there. If you are subscribing to me, you can go to the Webcomics Handbook and look up that comic template. It has like 7 features that every comic newsletter should have, including a well thought out headline. We talked about headlines a couple weeks ago here on the live stream. A well thought out headline and subhead. Those are the things that are going to attract people to either clicking on that link and get your open rate higher, or they're going to attract people to subscribing in the first place if they find it organically through, let's say, a Google search. Okay. So a headline, the comic itself in vertical scroll format. You do not want to post a comic page on Substack. Never, ever, ever. Because A, it's probably not very readable. B, it's not a great reading experience. You don't want to put somebody in the position where they've got to click on it and then pinch it and then zoom and make their finger go back and forth, because they're not going to do that. Never, ever, ever. Remember, they are slapping over with content. They don't need to jump through hoops to read yours. You've got to make yours very easy to read, or else they won't bother, because they've got a plethora of other things to do with their time. So that comic has got to be in a vertical scroll. And then promotion, if you're doing Patreon, or subscribe to my Substack. And then here's the one that people don't really think about, but I'm very much sold on it. And that is a transcript of your comic. Not necessarily for your readers. I really don't care whether they're reading along with that transcript. Sometimes my readers read the transcript and find mistakes, and I'd rather they didn't read it. But a transcript. Why the transcript? That's just for SEO, because eventually You're probably going to have it set up so that your newsletters go public, right? That anybody can read those newsletters on a Substack app, for example, or they can find it through a Google search. All of that stuff is happening because of the search engine. It's spidering words, and you want them to have words to find. Okay. That's the only reason I put the transcript in there. It ain't for my readers. It's for me. Okay. And then at the bottom, I like to have, and you can just go to your notes in Substack and click that little, those three dots that are in the upper right-hand corner. You can copy link, go over to your post on Substack, paste, and it will transport that note of yours into the post. And yeah, I know that gets confusing. Posts and notes, you can post a note, note a post, but you can actually copy and paste your note over into your post. Why? Because now you're basically saying to that person, hey, there's a lot more going on here. If you are interested in what I'm doing, you should also be going over to Substack Notes and see how unbelievably charming I am over there too, right? That only works to your best interest, because then again, you're going to be doing a lot of funneling there, because I funnel to my Patreon from Substack Notes. I funnel to a Kickstarter from Substack Notes. I funnel to my website from Substack Notes. It's only to your best interest that you give yourself one more area that you can funnel from. Okay. So that's the first type of newsletter you should be putting out in Substack posts. All right. Like again, 2 newsletters. One of them is your comic newsletter. The other one should be a more traditional newsletter. That's the one I want you to look at, that 500 word count, and keep yourself under 500 words. That's where you're talking to your readers. That's where you're saying, and again, I've got another post that says what to post on your newsletter when you don't know what to post. I've got lots of topics on the Webcomics Handbook here on Substack, but this newsletter can do any number of things. It can, if you're doing a long form comic, it can recap the recent storyline. Because remember, people aren't paying attention. They may not know everything that's going on in your storyline. They're not memorizing this stuff. So it's to your best interest, if you're doing a long form story, to do a little recap. Here's everything that's been going on since the beginning of this chapter, since the beginning of the storyline, right? You can talk about some of the stuff that you're doing other places. I do comics that are exclusive on Patreon. You better believe in that Evil Inc. newsletter, there's going to be a section where I get really enthusiastic about all the stuff I'm doing for my subscribers and my Patreon backers over on Patreon, right? And you can also talk about, to the extent that you're comfortable, talk about what's going on in your life. Now, remember, depending on your experience on the web, you may want to draw a very firm line, and you are absolutely well within your rights to draw a firm line. If there are certain parts of your life that you want to, or in some cases need to, keep private, you have to draw that line for yourself. But it's one of the other options that you can do, is sharing thoughts from your own life. If you're like many of us, you've got an awful lot of stuff going on, right? I don't know about you, but for me, I talk about any of the other number of projects that I've got going on. In my Evil Inc. newsletter, I'll talk about the Comic Lab podcast and what we've been talking about there. I'll talk about this live stream. I'll have a link to this live stream on YouTube for my Evil Inc., even though they probably don't care. Most of them don't care about comics, but some of them do. And some of them are just, as perverted as this sounds, some of them are just Brad Guigar fans, and they're like, oh, let's see what Guigar has to say about this. Hopefully, I don't say any of my subscriber strategies that are like, hey, why am I subscribing this guy? He's kind of Machiavellian. But I'll talk about that. I'll talk about the Comic Lab podcast. I'll talk about the new show I'm doing on YouTube called The Wrong Way Show with Dave Kellett and Kevin McShane. I'll find ways to mentioning all that in the newsletter, because that's going to just bring more readers to those other things. And it's also a way in that newsletter to make my readers feel more connected to me. Here's a guy that's doing a whole bunch of stuff. I saw Erica Moen joined us in the chat. Erica's a really good person to subscribe to here on Substack because Erica does this very, very well. I know what Erica's growing in her garden. I'm not a gardener particularly myself. I've got a black thumb, not a green thumb, but I love reading about Erica and her triumphs in her garden. You know, I like that. I enjoy that. Right? That is a Saturday morning read for me, sitting out on the front porch of my row house here in Philadelphia, sipping coffee, and I can read about this experience. Uh, who would have thought, right? That was going to be intriguing. But see, since I know Erica and I like her comics, when I think about Erica gardening, it makes me happy. Right? It's got nothing to do with comics. Here's a creative person that's living their life. And here's a little part of it that I get to be privy to. And it's kind of cool. Right? So those are the things that should be going into your second version of your newsletter. You should be posting your comic. Absolutely. And then maybe once a week or once every 2 weeks, you should be doing a reader outreach newsletter where it's mostly obviously text, but remember, we're cartoonists. We're visual people. Don't make that mistake I see a few people making. And I open up that newsletter and it's just a row of gray text. I want to see photos. I want to see images. Even if it's a sketch from your sketchbook, I want to see that. In fact, we're getting a little bit. Yeah, Margaret says there's something so soothing about those gardening posts. Yeah, you're right. One of the things, and I'm going to wrap up with this conversation. One of the things that always amazes me is that the power of a sketch, something that you and I consider unfinished work, unfinished, unwashed, full of blemishes, right? I just experimenting this week. I have, and some of you I know have been participating. I post something from my sketchbook, usually saying, this has been hanging out in my sketchbook and I just don't have the right punchlines for it and stuff, but here it is. And what happens is go back to some of those posts that I've made on social media, particularly on Blue Sky. And also I've been putting it in notes. I go back to some of those and look at the engagement that those got. Those ugly, scribbly pencil sketches got better engagement than the stuff that I put my finished hard work, heart and soul into. Why? Partially because I think people value sketches more than you and me do. And by the way, when I say sketch, I don't mean a beautiful illustration that some of these jerks put on social media and say, here's a sketch, here's a little doodle I did. And you look at it and it's something that clearly took hours and hours of work. Their little doodle, their little sketch. You make me so mad. Don't do, and honest to goodness, I'm being serious now. Don't do that to young artists. They look at somebody saying, here's a sketch, and they think that the sketch has a meaning. It means it was dashed off. It was a doodle. It was something and when you're putting beautiful art out on social media saying it's a sketch, you're hurting those younger artists when you do that. Don't do that. I'm telling you, if there's one thing you do for your Uncle Brad, stop using sketch indiscriminately. It ain't a sketch. And by the way, the reason you're doing that is that it's because of your own insecurity. You're saying, well, I don't want people to judge me. Well, come on. Your stuff is fine. You're putting beautiful art. That's great. You don't need to call it a sketch. And then these young artists are saying, holy shit, if that's a sketch, this thing that I'm working for 3 nights on is terrible. So be careful of the word sketch. But yeah, the thing that I've been getting the most engagement on social media is these stupid little sketches. And partially, and I'm going to leave you with this thought, what else is compelling about those sketch posts that I do on Blue Sky and when I put it up on notes? I have to be careful now, having just had that conversation that there's 2 things, posts and notes. If I say the words I posted it on notes, that's going to be confusing, right? So I got to be very careful about how I say what I uploaded it on notes. But if you go back and see those on notes, you'll see that they've got great engagement. And the answer to why that is because I gave something to my followers that they could participate in and something that made them feel smart, right? because I always say, "Oh, I don't have a punchline for this," and for the most part, I didn't. There's a couple I kind of do, but for the most part, they're just sketches that didn't go anywhere, right? But then I put that on social media and I put my followers in a situation where they can participate and be creative and contribute and feel good about themselves. Do you know how powerful that's, there's a reason that that gets engagement. That's a powerful thing to offer someone is here's an opportunity for you to be clever. Here's an opportunity for you to solve the mystery, right? I've been doing a lot of thinking about those kind of posts beyond, those surface level posts that we do on social media all the time. What can I do that lets my readers shine, gives them an opportunity to participate and be the smart one? Maybe Brad Guigar doesn't got to be the smartest little light bulb in the drawer every time. Maybe this is an opportunity for me to say, hey, what do you think about this? That kind of, and it's an old concept, interactive media, but that kind of interactive facet for the social media post is really powerful. Is really powerful. Think about how some of the ways that you could do that with your comic beyond that. I'll tell you another one that I did real quick. I just in my comic had kind of a mystery that came to a head, and there had been a corporate spy, and one of the people in the office was identified as the spy. We won't say right now whether that was a true identification or no, or whether they got the wrong guy, but just for the sake of argument, he got expelled as the corporate spy. And my readers were like, I don't believe he did it. And so I did on social media a little poll where I said, who's the mole? And I put up all these characters that came up and were a little bit questionable during the storyline and let them participate in a poll as to who they thought the culprit was. That was a really interesting one for me to see where that one got engagement and where it didn't get engagement. That one, I guess I shouldn't be surprised, got huge engagement on Patreon, where my readers are the most tuned in. Patreon, and by the way, that wasn't a waste. I would have liked to have seen that get better engagement on Blue Sky, but remember, there are worse things than finding little sudden delights for your Patreon backers that they didn't expect popping into their feed that day. My process with Patreon has always been to underpromise and overdeliver. My Patreon backers get a lot of surprises throughout the month of stuff that they weren't necessarily promised, but boop, hey, take a look. Here this is. Next time we get together, I'll try to make a note, but if I don't remember to do this, one of you folks, I want you to remind me let's talk about strategies for doing that on Patreon, specifically the Patreon content exchange, which I'm a big believer in, and then other things that you can do to give extras to your Patreon backers, which would also, for those of you doing paid subscriptions on Substack, translates directly into Substack. You can do all of this stuff that I'm talking about on Patreon on Substack. I'm going to try and make a note on that, but it's really a pretty compelling conversation for us to have next time we all get together. Until then, thank you so much for helping me ease out of a Friday. I've got a little bit of penciling yet to do before I call it a day, but this was a fantastic opportunity to talk comics. Thank you so much. I hope you have a good weekend coming up. I hope you give yourself a rest. I've been doing a lot of talking on my Blue Sky about the importance of giving yourself a rest. We think that we need to earn a rest. Well, I haven't worked hard enough to do a rest. I'm going to do another hour. I've got to get this page done. You know what, pal? I got news for you. Unless you've got like a death sentence hanging over your head or something. Take it from a guy who used to be just like that. You got a whole world. You've got a whole life of comics creating that's stretched out in front of you. You need to sit back and enjoy it a little bit, and you need to pace yourself so you don't burn yourself out. Because it's on one hand, I can say you've got a whole world, a whole life of comics heading in front of you, and you're like, oh yeah, look at that beautiful vista, what a beautiful thought. But it's also like, oh my God, I've got an entire life of comics in front of me. What am I going to do? You got to pace yourself, pal, or else you're not going to make it. So sometime this weekend, I want you to take a little bit of time that maybe you weren't planning to. Put your feet up, do something that is just for you, something that is just for your enjoyment, something that's not for social media, something that's not for your comic, something that's maybe for you. Maybe go out and do something nice for your community even. That kind of makes some people feel good if they find an opportunity to do that. Maybe do something like that. Okay. But do something for you. And then come back Monday, hit that drawing board like you mean it, and we can get right back into the grind, all of us, and dog it out. But this weekend, give yourself, take an opportunity to take a little break. Okay. In the long run, you're going to get more work done. I guarantee you that. I guarantee you're going to get more work done if you pace yourself and you give yourself breaks and you're nicer to you than you're probably being right now than you would if you just dogged it out and then snapped at one point and said, "Oh my God, I don't know, I'm burnt out." Right? I can't believe it. I've lost my passion for this. Give yourself a break, okay? Because I think you're worth it, and you should too. And have a good weekend. I will see you all back here Friday. It's a standing date with us, 2:00 Eastern Daylight Time. And get out there and enjoy some of that daylight. Bye-bye, everybody. Have a good weekend.